Nope, we don't say welcome anymore at the beginning. This is the Bowls of Life podcast. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Virginia. As we've gone through life, we've learned something important.
Life is messy. It gets complicated.
But we've also learned that we can create tools to help us jump into the mess of life and make an adventure of it.
Welcome to our messy adventures of faith, family, and food.
Welcome in.
Welcome in.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Hey, we got to work together today.
Yeah, that was fun.
It was fun. We didn't really work together all that much, but we worked in the same space for the same thing.
Yeah, we were about, 10, 20 feet from each other, and we were texting.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, technically, I wasn't even doing that job anymore that much.
You were on to your other job.
Yeah, my other job. That's what I got.
Yeah, I miss working alongside you. The 1 year we got to do that in Australia, we were literally together all the time.
All the time.
All the time. And I love that. That was so good. Our first year of marriage, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, we celebrated 1 year there.
Mm-hmm.
With some awesome friends who took us on a trip and paid for it and all the things.
Yeah, that was really kind of them.
It was. We didn't even realize that was what was happening until it was good and fully in swing. Which is kind of funny, and looking back on it, it's like we probably should have noticed that a little more beforehand, but I don't know.
Yeah. No, they were just really kind, as everyone was in Australia.
As they were. Yes. It was good times.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are we talking about?
Well, we are on to the next chapter. Screentime.
Screentime. The next chapter of what, though?
Oh, yeah, I guess in case you just popped in. This is a series that we're doing through the book Habits of the Household. We're taking it chapter by chapter and just discussing what Justin Whitmel Early has to say about your habits in your own household.
Yeah. So Screentime is somewhat addressed in the Waking Up episode. I was going to say first episode. It wasn't the first, but the first main topic of the book, Waking Up. But we're going to dig into it a bit deeper in this one. And when it comes to Screentime is ultimately a fight for who is going to form your kids. Who's going to form you, too, but who's definitely going to form your kids.
Yeah. And Screentime, I think, encompasses a lot of things.
Yes.
Because it's not just like screen time on your phone. Like, it's screen time on the TV.
On a tablet. If you own a computer. Not everybody does anymore. Yeah. But if you have one of those.
Yeah, so just screen time in general.
Yeah. We're fighting our legs. Bear with us. Yeah, he kicks off talking a little bit in this one about how parenting is it's nonstop. Like, literally, you wake up and you're a parent.
Yeah.
And when your kids go to sleep, you're actually still a parent most of the time if you're having to clean up the house or wash dishes or whatever.
Yeah. That's just what it is. You're just,
at all hours.
Yeah, there's no, pause.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah, that's part of it. And the thing with screens that can be really helpful is they can buy us time during the day to do the things we need to do, whether that is things like picking up around the house, washing dishes, clothes, whatever. It may just buy us the moment to sit down and breathe because you've heard Mom or Dad so many times you're ready to throw the next person who says that, and you just need a moment to catch your breath, and screens can very much provide that.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that I homeschool the kids and still work at home, a lot of times I use the TV so that my kids won't be upset that I'm about to leave them with whoever's keeping them that day to go work. I'm like, okay, we'll turn on the TV, and that pretty much always makes them happy enough to let me go without tears. So it's definitely useful. I know we talked a little bit about this, I think, like you said, in the wake up episode, but using it in the morning time is one thing that we try not to do here, but sometimes it's like that for many parents. Morning time is feels like the best time to do it because that's when you can sit down and have your coffee or have a break in the morning before like you're even awake, you know? So I know that's kind of like something we use with our kids, but even ourselves, like we jump to the screen pretty quickly because it's literally like at our fingertips. Yeah.
One of the things with screens and using them is just the simple fact that they tell really good stories in ways that are subtle. Sometimes, I mean, it's clearly the overt story of whatever you're watching or playing or whatever. But a lot of times there's even stories behind the primary story that screens tell in a way that not much else can do, and they grab us and hold on to us. And the thing is, they're teaching us, but they're also teaching our kids things. And anything we don't teach our kids, screens are more than happy to teach them, both in a positive sense, but also in a very negative sense. Like, screens will tell your kids stories about all sorts of things. I mean, I think of Pete the Cat on Amazon Prime, and Sally the Squirrel has two dads. And at no point do they ever really talk about that. But it's subtly normalizing for our kids that, hey, people have two dads. And, like, what's that? And why is that a thing? And then there's a whole conversation to be had there if the conversation is ever had. But chances are good, unless your kid literally looks at you and goes, hey, why does Sally have two dads? That's not a conversation that's had. It's just something that's being subtly normalized by a screen to our kids.
Yeah. I think about just in general, like when we're watching a story, watching a TV show or a movie, it's almost like it becomes reality. Does that make sense? Like, your child, we can go out in the world and experience people and different cultures and different, beliefs, or we can watch it on a screen, you know? And since you can't experience everything out in the world, you can pull it up on a TV, you know, or it can happen as you're watching a TV show. So it's almost like it becomes a part of your reality, because you might not ever come into contact with, I was going to say a talking cat, talking about Pete the Cat, but, right. Things that happen on TV, you may never come in contact with that in the real world, but it actually becomes part of your reality. Yeah.
So I was reading in an email newsletter I get the other day, it was talking about drowning and how what is depicted as drowning is not drowning. Drowning that we see on TV and all of that, like, is this whole dramatic splish splashing around, people screaming, gasping for air. But in reality, drowning is actually a very quiet thing. By the time someone's reached drowning stage, they're not really capable of splashing around. They've probably exhausted themselves, or either they're a small child who can't do that. And there's no screaming and gasping for air. It's a very silent, and then it's done. But yet, anytime we talk about or imagine drowning, we imagine what we've seen on TV as if that's reality.
Yeah.
Screens have taught us that that's reality.
Oh, that's the same for so many things.
Yeah.
Think about your water breaking. Like, the way that the as a pregnant woman, like, water breaking, not the pipes in your house.
The pipes in your house, as I thought.
But yeah, anyways, you see it on TV and it happens, very dramatically, but then in real life, for most, it's not that way. So yeah, I think we see a lot of things on screen that are just depicted for the drama of it. And in our mind, that's what it's supposed to look like, or is going to look like, or what we need to expect it to look like. But that may not actually be true.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And so screens tell these captivating stories that can be good and can be bad. We'll get to that a little bit more, but here's where Justin kind of takes it in the book. He leans into the fact that a big, massive part of parenting is setting limits for your children.
Yeah.
And that wide range of things that we set limits in. But in our modern life, the default when it comes to screens is really limitless. Like, we are continually adding screens to things throughout our homes, throughout our schools, throughout our church gatherings. I mean, think of a place where they haven't added a screen in some way. And you it's hard to. I mean, we literally make refrigerators with TVs built into them.
That is
now.
wild. I think about like children's church, however you call it.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this the other day as I'm trying to figure out what to do just at home for our kids when it comes to Bible stories. And I kind of keep falling back on these different types of videos, and yet I don't want to use a screen all the time for whether it be an app that plays a game and goes through the story and tells it very, very book-like, or if it's on a YouTube video, and even though he's basically reading a story, it's still on a screen. And that's not a bad thing.
Right.
But like even in our children's churches, like we're using, screens to tell stories, which again, not a bad thing. But I don't know. I think back on my own childhood, and
there weren't so many screens.
There was no screen. I mean,
and the quality of things that was on them was often just dumb and not all that engaging.
Yeah.
So we didn't grab onto it. But yeah, it is core to everything now. I think that's one of the things I will appreciate about homeschooling for however long we choose to do it, is that Luna won't be primarily on a laptop or iPad as most public schools are now.
That still blows my mind. Obviously, we haven't walked into that experience yet, and because our kids are homeschooling, but the fact that these little babies are literally using a computer to test.
Yep.
I don't what? Like paper and pencil. What's happening?
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. I mean, again, not necessarily a bad thing, but it just kind of blows my mind to think that we're at least I feel like we're in the future, and yet we still don't have flying cars.
Oh, yes.
Kidding.
That's a whole thing. I saw something the other day. I think it was Seth Godin, who's a leadership guy. He was talking, and it's a really long quote. I won't even pretend to try and do it. He said, but basically, bad 1950s sci-fi movies always depicted tools, essentially. It was the jetpack or a ray gun or things like that had it had this purpose, and it did this thing, and that's what we imagine the future would to be. But instead, here we are in the future they were depicting with a pocket-sized computer with access to limitless knowledge and billions of people, and we use it primarily to watch stupid short videos.
That's so funny. Yep.
Yep.
Made me think of a conversation with some homeschool moms at dance the other day, and we were talking about the encyclopedias and how
what is that?
We had to use the encyclopedia when we were in school to look up things.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the World Wide Web, www.
Whatever.
Right. And I remember being in our, SWAT, not the academic thing, and you could use the encyclopedia, or you could go to www. and ask Jeeves, or
computer we bought, it was either in 2000 or 2001 that my parents bought, had the Britannica CD-ROM.
Yes,
I remember it.
That was the other thing we had, and just that was so cool to have that new thing. But anyways, it's just we used to pull it up on encyclopedias, and I even think about now, Luna will ask, what does a giraffe eat? And my initial reaction to that when she first started asking questions like that was, this was before I knew how to think like a homeschool mom. So whoops. But I would say, hey, Alexa, what does a giraffe eat? And she'd answer. And so now Luna's just ask Alexa. This is Ask Jeeves back in the day. Just ask Alexa. And I'm well, how else are we going to find out? I don't have a stack of encyclopedias like my mom did.
Yeah. So do we need to buy encyclopedias now? Is that what I'm learning in the middle of this podcast?
Again, back to that conversation, we talked about buying them when people are selling them.
Yeah.
For Facebook Marketplace and stuff. And it's they're probably outdated. Yeah. No, they're definitely outdated. But even if you were to look back on some of the information, it would probably be we don't do that anymore. Or that's not true anymore, sort of thing.
We've learned better. Which is sometimes true and sometimes not. That's a whole other podcast.
So screens are naturally just going to be a part of our life. And, the story that about his wife, when he came home one day, his wife was no more TV. And they got rid of their TV. And he talks about this, and we'll probably get to it, but like, yeah, we could just like cut out screens altogether, but that's probably not realistic.
Yep.
So, we have to figure out how to put up the right limits and boundaries and what have you, but just do it well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the story of the Bible, from the very beginning, God put a limit in place. I mean, the limit was, don't eat from this specific tree. You're welcome to all these other things, but this is where the boundary is. Why did God put that boundary in place? It was to protect the first humans, Adam and Eve. It was, this boundary will protect you, and if you cross it, there will be harm and pain. And ultimately, when they crossed it, what was there? Harm and pain and brokenness for the rest of creation, for the rest of human history until time ends.
Yeah, thanks.
Right? And but so we have this inbuilt desire for things, and unless there are limits around it, our desires will just destroy
wild.
us.
Yeah. I mean, there's freedom in the boundaries. I'll always say that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole model of biblical freedom, is finding the right limitations to live inside of. And so that's really our goal as parents in general, is to set the right limitations for our kids to live inside of. But it's also the goal for specifically when it comes to setting limits around screens. And so he kind of leans into, and I think it was his wife who kind of talked about it, like setting this limit of, hey, we're not doing screens until the very end of day, whatever it was, let's call it 4 p.m. Like there's no screens until 4 p.m. It was actually not only difficult because her kids were asking for it throughout the day, it was difficult because it cost her the time that she would typically do things like wash the dishes or prep for the next part of the day or whatever she needed to do. She no longer had a screen to occupy her kids.
Right. And I think about this because I'm in this, and I know some of you listeners may have like older children, and screen time limits look a little bit different than this, but just, bear with me here. So I just go back to like my childhood and what it was like before screens, what a unique thing as millennials.
Yeah, and
we got to
were
live
on a little bit of the tail end.
Yeah, we were a little bit younger, I think. Yeah. But yeah, like we got to kind of live in both worlds, which is kind of cool. But anyways, what I'm saying is, like, with our children, what did our parents do? You know what I'm saying? I think about my parents who lived, like, we had a farm. Mm-hmm. And there was no screens which obviously they needed us to help them. But there was no screens to say, like, hey, we didn't even have like TV in our house. We had a TV, but it was antenna.
No cable,
yeah. For the longest. But sorry, I'm getting to my point here. Okay, yeah, to go wash the dishes. The 1 hour she was letting her kids watch TV so that she could go wash the dishes, when instead, I feel like they could be playing, imaginative play, natural play, just playing, or helping her wash the dishes and learning in that, you know what I'm saying? And so I think about that, and I'm like, that's what I have to figure out for our, for our own family, is like, okay, if I'm not letting them watch TV now, just at this time, we still let them watch TV, but if I'm not letting them watch TV until a certain time, what are we going to do? And that's the question that my child asks. Well, what are we going to do? And I'm like, look at this room. Like, you have so many things to play with, and we could go outside, or you could come join me while I wash the dishes.
Yep. And the truth is, that's painful, because is imaginative play going to last as continuously and solely focused as they do with the TV? Absolutely not. They're going to call you after 4 minutes of being in there, and they're going to want your help with something, or they're going to want you to sit by them while they play. Or if they're helping wash the dishes, is that going to go as well as if you were to wash the dishes?
It'd take much longer.
If they're younger, it is absolutely not. If they're older, it still might not.
Yeah. And so complaints and all that might come along with it.
Yes. So he kind of just says, like, limits are painful for everybody, but I love the way he talks about it, because he says, as parents, we take the pain now so that our kids don't have to. We're sacrificing the ease of our life so our kids can have a better and hopefully more biblical foundation and formation in their life. Like, we're taking the pain of not having screens to pacify them with in this moment. We're taking the frustration and the anxieties and all the things, and we are having to hold those in a way that, our kid is feeling it, but truthfully, like, again, we're younger kid parents, so we think in terms of younger kid parents. So, but like the thing she's feeling, specifically Luna, in that moment, like, she's going to be past that in the next 10 minutes. And she's never, more than likely, going to think about that moment and those frustrations ever again. And she's not even going to be thinking about them at bedtime the same way you and I are. And we're absorbing that pain so that she doesn't have to feel what that is creating in her in the long run if we're continually just putting her in front of a screen.
Yeah, I think that sums up a good bit of parenting, because it's like we are, maybe good parenting is like we take the pain now so that we can form our children. We can train them up in the way they should go. Or you could take the easy way out, right?
Yep.
And sometimes you need it. You got to turn the TV on and you got to let some time pass while you get something done, and I mean, you figure out what is acceptable and okay in your own household. But I think we also have to look at the truth of the matter and see, like, if we overuse it, it's definitely going to affect our children in a negative sense.
Yep.
And we have our own experience. We would when Luna started going to daycare and she'd come home, my thought was, I just want her to relax, not have to think about anything when she comes home, because she's been at school. She's been having to put it on all day. I call it school. It was daycare, but there was a part of it that was school too. But it was like, I'm thinking they're doing all their colors and their shapes, and she's having to be in a line, and she's having to do this and that and this and that. And so my thought was, let's come home. We'll have a snack. We'll turn on the TV. She can just like zone out and relax for a little bit. And at first we were just doing like 30 minutes or so, and she wasn't that quite like into watching stories yet. Yeah. But I remember doing that, and I felt really good about that choice, because I really wanted my child to be able to just come home and unwind.
Yep.
Knowing that being at school for that long
is exhausting.
And all the
other emotions you might feel.
Yeah, like pent up emotions probably. So it came back to bite us, because it turned into a habit that was hard to like, she wouldn't let go of it.
Yeah.
I could not sway her to do anything else.
Like, open the door to the house, we get a snack and we watch TV, and that is what we are going to do. Or we can spend that same length of time listening to her yell and scream because she wants it. She
wanted the TV, yeah. And we found out later that we didn't realize that daycares use TV too.
Or the amount of.
Yeah, so we know that we realized that she was also watching TV at daycare. And so that made me go, oh, well, if she's having, screen time at daycare, then we really don't need that much in the little amount of time in the evening that we had before bedtime. And we learned really quickly that we could not do screen time past like 7 p.m. Really past like after dinner.
Yeah.
Whenever dinner happened, which was a little bit earlier at that time. So we had to figure it out. And we thought we really thought like we were doing a good job of like limiting her screen time, but also allowing her to have it. And then, like, as time went on, we realized, oh, yeah, we could definitely do this a little better. And especially depending on your child. We have a child who really zones in on the TV and zombies out and does not blink and is hard to pull away. And I've heard a lot of parents say that TV turns their kids into little
terrors.
Yeah, it just makes their attitude, it shifts their attitude, it makes their mood change, especially when you have to turn it off.
Yep.
Or you start to set those limits. Even if they're the limits you've always had, they still don't, accept them. Yeah, they still fight against it. So some kids will, watch TV for a couple minutes and then they start playing. But that wasn't true so far for our children.
Yep.
At least one of them. And so we had to learn real quick how to put those limits in place. And we'll talk about some ideas, I think, later. But
yeah, no, we can get into, he gives a ton of good, just practical guides without just saying, hey, do exactly this, of more just like, here's some guides of directions you can take. But I think the conversation to have before we talk about the limitations we put on our kids is just acknowledging the limitations that we have to put on ourselves as parents to do this well. I mean, ultimately, parents are going to lead the way with this. Thinking about like car rides, if we want to say, hey, a 2-hour car ride or less, we don't do screens. That's one of his guidelines. I don't remember exactly how many hours, but we'll say 2 hours. 2 hours or less, we don't do screens in the car, so we're not going to watch the DVD players. We're going to try and have conversations, things like that, which is great. Love that. Love using car time for trying to have conversations with our kids. The catch is, if our kids look up and whoever's in the passenger seat is on their phone, they're then going to go, wait, I want to be on a phone. What are you watching up there? What are you doing up there? And so that's just a really easy example of, we're setting the example.
Yeah. I mean, I think about it all the time when a child asks for TV and I say no. But then 2 seconds later, I pull out my phone. And even, excuse me, even if I'm just looking at like a message that was just sent to me, or I'm looking at the calendar because I need to know what's up, like, it's still a screen. And so to a child, it looks like you're saying they can't have a screen.
But you can.
But you can. So yeah, I realized real quick that I need to be mindful of what I'm doing on my phone for my screen time and reflect like how it, reflects to my children, because it looks limitless in my hands.
Absolutely.
And again, whether I'm texting you or looking at the calendar, it might not look right, to the child because they just see me entertaining myself on my phone.
And so we have to find what the limits are for us, especially directly in front of our kids. And then as we're finding our limits and putting them in place with things like from the previous episode of choosing scripture before smartphones. Just those kind of wise guides that should work well for us. We can start to find those limitations for our kids as well. I kind of think of that. It's a fairly popular meme. And I'm about to describe a meme, so, bear with me.
Yeah.
It's an image of two moms and two kids sitting on a bench together, and one kid is reading and the other kid is on a tablet or something. And so the mom of the kid with the tablet turns to the mom of the kid who's reading a book and says, oh, how do you get yours to read? While she holds a phone in her hand and the other mom is also holding a book in her hand. Yeah. I mean, your kid's going to repeat what they see.
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, I've said it before, I'll say it again, we model.
Yes. Like,
our children, they're going to come into contact with many other people in their lives, but they are going to copy what their parents do.
Yes.
And if you want your child to do something better than say it, you do it.
Yep.
You do it for them. You do it in front of them. You model it, and they'll get the picture.
Yeah, our early pastor, Bryant, I've often heard him say, especially in parenting series, what parents do in moderation, kids will do in excess. And I think that most applies to things that are very easy to latch on to.
Yeah, I think that has to do with like specific things.
Yes, it's not true in everything, and in some
depending on your
cases,
child's,
they'll do the exact opposite in excess.
Right. I think it's dependent on the child and their desires. But if it's something that's like extremely desirable,
yes,
then even in moderation, being modeled, your kid may likely still do it in excess.
Yes.
So you have to just be extra mindful. That makes me think of, I don't know who's going to relate to this. I just think it's funny. Just like the energy that we have to bring when we're leading worship. You basically want to make sure you're leading with like 10 times more energy because when you're leading out, you're modeling for the people in the crowd, the church, whatever.
Yeah. It's like the energy on something you filmed versus being there in person. The film always brings the energy level down.
Yeah. So anyways, modeling for your children. You basically have to model it on an even, like, I don't know, stricter level.
Yeah.
Not strict, but yeah.
There's just got to be a lot of limitations on yourself if you expect to put a lot of limitations on your kid.
Right.
And when we look at our kids and the way that what screens do to our kids and what it's subtly teaching, I mean, do limitations sound fun? No. Do limitations cause pain to us as parents? Yes. Are limitations a really good idea, especially around screens? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so he spends the majority of this chapter honestly just hanging out in the more, you might call it nuts and bolts, practical side of things. And I think maybe his biggest starting point is just starting to pick like times and locations that screens are acceptable and not acceptable, and then to kind of build out from there. You make those very clear to your kids. So if it's a new one, you start saying, hey, this is what we do. Like with Luna, one of the things we were doing for a while was kind of letting her watch a little bit of TV while Ezra would nap, because she doesn't nap much anymore. But we started realizing what would happen is she'd watch a little bit of TV, we'd turn it off for a few minutes, Ezra would get up and he'd want to watch a minute or two of TV. So now Luna's getting even more TV. And so we finally just had to go, hey, you're actually getting way too much TV on these afternoons when he naps. So we're not going to do TV while he naps.
And we had to explain it to her, like, there are other things we can do that we normally don't get to do when he's awake, just because he's like all involved in it as a toddler. But like, she
doesn't love that. No. She's still going to. She asks because it was such
napping,
a long routine for her. Yeah, she asked for it.
Here, another funny one is like, when I brought the kids home part time, I had to create a rhythm, what we were going to do with screens. And it was, we will not turn the TV on until 10 a.m. And I didn't tell her, she can't read time anyways. But
especially him.
But I definitely would wait till 10, and it would be like a little bit of TV then, and then we do like some more stuff. And I was like trying to make it like sun time before screen time, but we didn't always go outside. But regardless, it was like I need the morning to go by a little bit more before we turn the TV on. And anyways, as time went on, and she would hear me say it's not 10 o'clock yet, she actually went and stayed with our family, my brother and his wife and their little girl. And Arletty, my sister-in-law, told me, she said, she about 10 o'clock. She came up to me and she said, is it time for TV yet?
You just had it ingrained.
She's like, she knew it was TV time,
it's because it was time of day.
10 a.m. And she would literally even say sometimes, like, is it 10 yet? Because she kind of caught on to that. So yeah, like you set those times, and then especially if it's new, you've got to voice it, and they'll catch on.
Yeah, and you got to stick to it.
Just stick to it. Yeah.
That's the thing, is if you set a limitation and then you only stick to it once or twice, and then you let it slide for a while, like coming back around to it after you've let it slide for a while is going to be 10
even
times
harder.
The battle.
Yeah.
As it would have been.
We have to be disciplined with these.
I'll say the other thing he does around that, though, is he also acknowledges there can be exceptions. And his thing with exceptions is go ahead and make those too.
Yeah.
Like when
a kid is sick.
Sick kid, TV time is not unmonitored or unlimited. But depending on the kind of sick and just what's going on, yeah, let the kid watch some TV. They feel miserable. They're laying on the couch. They've probably been vomiting, whatever.
Yeah.
Let them watch some TV. It's fine. Go ahead and make that a clear rule. Hey, like, on sick days, we do that. But you're not sick, and we're not going to pretend like we're sick. And we can tell the difference. And so we make exceptions, and we make them clear as well. And I appreciated that, where it's like, there are rules, and there are exceptions to rules, and here's where they are. That's the thing with car rides for them, 2 hours or whatever, we're not watching it. But if we go on a trip that's longer than that, okay, we can have some screens in here, but maybe it's only X amount of time or this, that, or the other. And I appreciate exceptions to rules.
Absolutely, because this is not a legalistic thing.
Right.
That made me think of something like in the car. Nope, I can't remember what I was going to say. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. Keep going.
Okay. I also appreciate that they watch, and he recommends watching communally, meaning watching together. Like, there aren't screens in bedrooms in their house, and that's something we've always avoided as well. Like, we don't have screens in bedrooms. We don't take, I mean, you and I may take our phones to our room or whatever because they're there to charge, and that's probably a conversation for a different day. But we don't do devices in rooms, things like that. If we're going to watch something, we're watching together. It's about watching together to all of us experience this. That's one of the things our modern world with streaming has really lost in the wider community, is nobody's watching the same things at the same time anymore. So we don't have those things to talk about and engage with each other.
Yeah.
Like, whatever was on ABC or whatever the other 4 channels you got, like, we're not, 25% of us aren't all watching that one thing today, and so we can talk about it tomorrow. We're all watching a million different things, some of it from 50 years ago, some of it from this week, and so we can't engage with each other around it. But when we watch communally as a family, we now have this thing to talk about and discuss and experience together. Yeah,
and that's like going back to one of the first things we talked about when we started this episode. The reality that we are watching a show or a TV, a movie, that has maybe a different culture or a different, set of beliefs or, what have you. Now is the opportunity to not necessarily shelter your child from something in the world, even if it doesn't line up with your beliefs. But now is the time for you to have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
And I think I see this happen. And I'm so thankful that I have friends that have children that are older than mine, because I can get to learn from their experiences, and they share with me, and that is so nice. But they reach these moments where it's really scary or it's really frightening that they're watching a movie or a show and they didn't know it was going to have this type of content in it, and then it's like, what do we do? Well, let's have a conversation about it. So that we can talk about it and talk about what our family does and what what the world does and why we do it differently, what have you. So having conversations about it, I think, is where you can take what you see on the screen, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you'll shield your children from
inappropriate
there's a
things. Difference in letting your kid watch Van Wilder and letting your kid watch The Sandlot, the illustration he uses where the group of boys in there get a hold of some chewing tobacco, they super objectify the lifeguard at the pool and all kinds of other things that, hey, those are good things to have conversations about. Like, hey, tobacco usage really probably not a good thing for you, and here's why. Hey, objectifying and turning the opposite sex into just objects, not great. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
And one of the things he recommends is watching the credits of something, because if you make the credits play, that means you've also turned autoplay off or you skipped over to it. You guys then have the opportunity to have some conversation about it, whether it's super deep conversation like those, or it's just like, oh man, that one scene was hilarious.
Yeah.
And so watching the credits together gives them that opportunity to do that, to share in processing what was just experienced.
Yeah, you think about like back in the day when we would rewatch movies when they were good. I remember I was the kid, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but like when a new movie came out or you first got it on DVD or what have you, I would watch it like the whole weekend.
Oh yeah,
I'd watch it as many times as I could in that weekend.
Rentals, come on.
Yes,
you had to watch that rental twice to get your money's worth.
Get your money's worth. Yeah, you'd go rent a movie and it's like you'd watch it as much as you could, and that's so funny to think about. Like we would all rent our own movie, and depending on if you had your own TV or not, you'd either be watching it together or you might get to watch it by yourself in your room. That's totally different now. But yeah.
Yeah, he talks about instead of watching new content, watch
Yes.
good, proven content.
Yes, that's what I was
So
getting
they
at.
literally have a list of things that they'll watch, whether that's TV shows or movies. He actually leans towards movies so that it's like, hey, we're picking this specific night of the week, and we have family movie night, and let's all engage in this extended moment. And yeah, let's have that conversation. Then I got another one. So yeah, good content over new content.
Well, just like watching the art of rewatching things.
Yes.
We don't do that anymore. We have so many options at our fingertips, and we will scroll Netflix for 20 minutes before we even find something to watch.
It's like, okay, I'd rather just rewatch something, but
that we know
not have
is
to deal with the
good.
choice right now.
Exactly.
That's a whole other.
So you miss out on really getting to watch and rewatch a movie, and when you would watch it again, you'd see something else, or you would I don't know, get to like see this character development even more than you did the first go around, and the story starts to sit with you a little bit more. I even remember like coming out of a movie and like thinking about it for days.
Oh yeah.
But now it still happens. I feel like we never watch stuff
we
anymore.
don't watch it, yeah.
But now you don't get that because you're already on to the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you had no time to process what you just watched. It was literally just consumption.
Yeah, that's the irony with the Netflix model that they've captured themselves in now, that they drop whole seasons of the new show or whatever and people binge it, and then you can cancel Netflix for the next couple of months. And like they've literally experienced that. They see it happen when those very few, but when those cultural moment TV shows come out that everyone is talking about, Netflix will see a spike in subscribers and then see a drop in subscribers after a month or two. Where Amazon, Disney, and a lot of others have all learned from that mistake that Netflix is almost caught in at this point because it's the model they created, where most of the other streaming platforms still do weekly drops of new shows because they're trying to extend out people being subscribers. That's really their goal, but it honestly is good for you as someone watching it because it means you have to sit with it and remember it and process it in a way that you can't do when you binge all 12 episodes of Stranger Things or whatever it is.
There is only one show that I have ever watched from beginning to end on a weekly basis. The Vampire Diaries.
Vampire Diaries. Oh, goodness.
It started right as I was graduating high school, around that time. And I remember finding buddies in college that watched it, and we would, on Thursday night, we would watch it, or if we didn't catch it on Thursday, you could get it on the CW.com, like the next day. And as long as you got it like within, I think, like that weekend, you could still watch it. And then we'd talk about it. It was so exciting. That's the only show I can honestly say I watched from beginning to end at live on like when it came out, and there was so much excitement in that and fun and delayed gratification.
Yes.
Because when you and I went back and watched it, we got to watch it straight through.
We binged it. It was
Tyler's not proud.
I'm not proud. In my defense, we came back from Australia and didn't have internet, but Virginia had like
the DVDs.
3 seasons of that on DVD.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, good content. Watch it communally. I'll say another thing about content. It's a whole rabbit trail. Is that there is a difference in monitoring the amount of time your kids watch versus the actual content they watch, and there's just the different stimulation factors, especially around animated stuff, but also YouTube channel stuff a lot. The content that is most stimulating, your kid needs to watch the least amount of time. If it's a less stimulating show, they can watch more time of it without it affecting them as deeply.
Yeah, so look into that so that you understand like what, because I don't think we can explain it here,
Lord, no.
but like what's more or less stimulating and why it's more stimulating, like 3D versus 2D, that sort of stuff, loud sounds, et cetera, et cetera. So we're talking like Paw Patrol versus if you give a mouse a cookie.
Yes, those are two very different
Or
things.
think about like the shows we watched when we were kids, like Franklin and Bear in the Big Blue House, whatever.
It's not always true that older stuff is less stimulating, but as a general rule,
Mr.
older
Rogers.
stuff is less stimulating for your kid and is probably better.
Just better,
for them.
yeah. So with adults, I'm gonna talk to adults too, because I think that we need to also think about this.
Yes.
Just had like this epiphany as we think about this, but like there are shows out there that for adults are just stimulating and don't have a good storyline.
Oh, absolutely.
It's sexually promiscuous.
Yes.
Or it's got a lot of murder and gore. Mm-hmm. Or it's super duper dramified. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think of Breaking Bad, and Breaking Bad was one of the ones that did a really good job at cliffhangering every single episode in such a way that I didn't watch the show until after it was already off the air.
Yeah.
And so I binged the snot out of that show because at the end of an episode, I needed to know what was happening next.
Whether it was good or whether it was a good storyline or not.
The storyline, you can debate whether or not it was good, and it definitely wasn't good, wholesome by any stretch. But yeah.
Like if you take out some of like the shock factor things,
yes,
that we even say like, oh, that doesn't bother me, the F-bomb or that sex scene or the head getting cut off by the zombie or whatever, like if you take out some of that, like would you still watch it?
Yep.
Would you still be as intrigued and interested in the storyline if some of that stuff was not there?
If you had to watch it one episode per week, would it be worth coming back to next week?
Yeah.
Or would you have moved on to something else?
Would you have moved on? That's a good question. That's a good. So think about it for yourself too. I think like we're talking about our children, but like we said, we have to model it for ourselves. I mean, in ourselves for our children first.
He talked about watching communally, but he does also say that it's okay if you do leverage, like, hey, we have a family movie night, and oftentimes we watch this movie together as a whole family, but he'll also say there are just some nights on those nights that we put on something that our kids can connect with, and my wife and I think her name's Lauren. He's like, Lauren and I will then go and whether that's do something around the house or just go to the other side of the house and have a conversation that we can't have with kids. Like, it's okay to have them watching communally while you do something else, especially if it's a piece of content that you're very familiar with and you've had some of those conversations or whatever around it.
One more thing and we can move on.
Go.
The thought of like rewatching, these days we're always having to watch or read a review on something before we let our children watch it because we have to know what is our children are going to be exposed to. So that's another perk of your kids watching things that are, like have stood the test of time that you've watched, and rewatched, because you do not have to spend the extra energy previewing or reading the reviews and watching it yourself before you let them watch it. Because like imagine, or like having to sit there and watch it with them if maybe it is a night where you need to go clean up the kitchen while they're on, watching TV. So yeah, like just takes some of the like exhaustion out when you can just rewatch a movie. That's good. Okay. Yeah. Go
on. He says, be confident in your choices, but be gracious towards others' choices.
Oh yeah, like what we do in our household doesn't have to be what they do in their household.
Yes.
And if my children are going to so and so's house and they have different screen time rules, we'll be fine. It's okay.
But within even that, with going to other people's houses, he does still have some set rules with his kids. And he don't really even dig into what they were, as best I could remember. But it is still wise to say, hey, I know you're going hanging out so-and-so's house, and there'll be some screen time things, but here's some rules. Whether that's, hey, you can't be up past midnight still on a screen, like that's unacceptable. Or, hey, if it's got sex scenes and things like that, like you cannot watch that. Or it might be if we're watching a movie at my friend's house that I've never seen, and the kid, like I'm supposed to reach out to my parent and just ask, hey, can I watch this? Like whatever those rules are, and you have to find that limit of what you're comfortable making your kid be embarrassed with, because there's potential for that, versus what are you comfortable with your kids potentially engaging with without you knowing. Like, you have to find that line, and it'll be hard. There's gonna have to probably be a level of, hey, like, this is probably gonna feel embarrassing
That's
to
so
you.
good, though. Like, I feel like we could talk for every single point, but I think about my childhood. I mean, my parents were very mindful of what we watched. Not to a, like, sheltering type way, but, like, sheltering in a good way. And there was a couple of times that I went over to a friend's house and things were not monitored, and we watched movies that were very inappropriate for a child of that age.
Yep.
But I knew that was wrong.
Yep.
And I knew that that was not something to watch. And I think it's really important that we make it a safe place for our children to come back and say, hey, I saw this.
Yep. I always appreciate Johnny Cuff. He says this all the time. He kind of keeps it in his social media rotation, where with his kids, they have a code, whatever.
Yes, love this.
Hey, is it okay if I do X, Y, Z? And the response from her parents, because he has 2 daughters, are always going to be no, so that his daughters can then turn around and look at her friends and go, hey, my parents said I've actually got to come home because X, Y, Z.
Yes.
And so you can...
It's an out
they
for
get
your
to
child.
put it off on you as the parent, so that they don't have to look at somebody and go, hey, I don't think this is appropriate, or hey, I don't think I should be doing that, or hey, my parents said I can't do this thing in our house. And it's like, hey, actually, my parents just let me know that I got to come home because something came up.
Yeah, I love that. And I was actually going to speak to that. Depending on your kid's age, like, can they drive home, or do you need to come pick them up, or, you know, are they even a little younger? I don't know. But it's almost like you said something about being embarrassed. It's like, wow, throw it off on the parent. Yeah, my parents, they won't let me watch that, you know, but at least, like, you've had these conversations already with your child, and they know that you're a safe place, and that you'll take the blame, because of course you will, you know, for your child not watching something specific. But yeah, having some rules set in place, I think that's great. Expectation rules for when they go to somebody else's house, so they know, like, I'm not supposed to be doing that. And if it happens, they're able to come back and talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also appreciate that they have rules for people who
come into their house.
Who come into their house. And basically the rule is, hey, when a bunch of kids are here at our house, if you have a phone, it lives here in this box by the door or wherever, and we don't really play on phones while we're off in rooms or whatever. He said, and if that's a problem, like, you're welcome to go home, but we don't do that here.
Yeah.
It's not a judgment about what you guys do at your house. This is just what we do at our house. And at our house, when we could be interacting with each other, we don't spend our time on the device. So if you'd like to go and play with everybody, you're welcome to do that. If you want to be on this device, you got to go home. Yeah. And he said never has a kid left and went home. They always choose to play over
using a screen. Yeah, which is cool.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great.
I love, he says, give clarity between the difference of entertainment and being on a screen for school or work. Some of that will be difficult with younger kids. Like, there's a level of trying to explain that to Luna right now that she doesn't understand. She's not going to get, but along the way, you kind of get to make that. He actually highly recommends having a digital Sabbath day. Whether you do that weekly or monthly, it's a day where you just turn off all the screens, and today we don't do screens. We have not done...
We had one day last week.
Okay, did we? Okay, go.
It was the day we were going to record this episode that we didn't get to.
Okay.
And I was, like, so proud, and I don't even remember what day it was, what was going on, but it was last week.
Yep.
And it may have been homeschool day.
Probably.
And, like, homeschool group day. And so I think I remember the whole day we did not turn on the TV, and I was so proud.
Yep. And so that's a form of digital Sabbath, of just saying, hey, we're digital Sabbathing from the TV, but to make that a fair one, it's probably got to even, not always, but to some extent, a digital Sabbath for parents as well.
Yeah.
And that's one I've always been drawn to try and attempt to some extent, but never, even for myself, I rarely ever go through a whole day where I don't have my phone at some point in it. I can do some days where I stay away from it for 99% of the day, but I don't know that I've ever cut my phone off for an entire day and just, it's nothing to me.
Yeah. No. Nope. No, never done that.
So that's one of those we're still trying to figure out what some of
digital
that may look
Sabbath.
like.
I like the idea of that, but I think I automatically just think of TV, but you're right. We've got to think about our phones too. And again, social media is
parents lead the way.
Parents lead the way, yeah. And I think social media is like the main thing that I'm looking at on my phone. I know some people are over there watching Netflix on their phone, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. Or podcasting, Marco.
The
app Marco. So, I don't know.
I think a lot of it is his goal is to make being off of screens the normal thing.
Yeah.
Instead of being on a screen as the normal. I think that's really the underlying. It's not that you need to never be on screens or anything like that. Like your kids should never see a screen. They've only got to use number 2 lead pencils to write. And no, it's like screens are fine. There's a ton of assets to having screens. It's just finding the right amount so that screens aren't life, I think, would really be the goal for all of it.
I saw a video today, speaking of screens. Joanna Gaines was in an interview. Joanna and Chip Gaines were in an interview, and, they're super famous, and, super famous, I guess. They're famous.
They're pretty famous, yeah.
And they have rules with their teenage children. I think 14 and 17-year-old daughters. They have more than those 2 daughters, but I think those may be the ones that they have had the social media conversation with, and that they are not allowed to have social media. And anyway, basically it was just saying, like, we're not going to have social media until you're, like, basically 18 or an adult. I think it's, like, right before they go to college they can get it if they want it. But she was even saying that it really hadn't been that big of a deal for her girls, like, they hadn't wanted it that much. And so the interviewer made the point. She said, I do this with my children as well. And my argument, when they argue, my argument back is always, when you can show me the research, like the evidence that you being on social media has any positives to it, then sure, yeah, I'll let you have it. And that's because there's no evidence. All the evidence is, that it's actually negatively impacting our children. So just an interesting fact.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole book that's been popular recently, The Anxious Generation.
The Anxious Generation,
where at this point, like, our parents would have said, hey, TV, watching it all the time, not good for you. And it's like, yeah, sure, totally. Parents believed that. Kids didn't, though. Like, as a general rule, I don't think we as millennials thought, oh, this TV is really bad for us, whatever. We were like, it's fine. We watch TV, we live our life, and do whatever. At this point, Gen Z, even into some of the older Gen Alphas, depending on where you cut those lines of generations, like, they fully know and acknowledge the deep, dark negatives of being on their phones.
I don't know if they do.
There's tons of research where they self-report how much being on social media negatively impacts them.
I got you.
There's survey data around.
Well, I'm thinking of a friend who has a 14-year-old, and as they start the conversation about limitations around, like, social media and stuff, like, the 14-year-old is like, no.
So
like,
that's one who hasn't spent a lot of time on it
maybe
yet,
so.
It's the ones who have spent a lot of time on it who recognize the negatives of it. I think that's kind of what the research suggests anyway.
Well, that's good. Yeah, because I know, like, I know even as a teenager, the whole statistics about, like, teenagers being worse drivers, like, that used to make me so mad. But it was true, and it's just because I didn't like being in a statistic that was negative, Yeah. It's like, I don't want to be that statistic. Like, that would never be me. But then again, it's like, but it is true,
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Yeah. I guess some of them do realize it, but maybe doesn't really make it easier to.
Yes, so that's one of the things again that same book shows is the fact that trying to get my words right here. knowing that it's bad for you, but also having the anxieties of what am I missing out on. Mm-hmm. So it's trading one anxiety for another. And so that's plays in perfectly to what I've been trying to search up over here on the computer while you were talking. Sorry for that distraction. Justin Whitmel Early, actually 2 weeks ago or so.
Oh, wow.
Got an email from him. I'm part of his email list, whatever.
Now y'all are best friends.
Yeah, we're best friends. That's why I call him Justin. No, his massive email list that he probably emails thousands of people from, talking about something called the Hang 10 movement that is based on the Anxious Generation book, and it's
who was written by
he's
a non-believer.
He's an agnostic cultural Jewish guy, basically.
Cool. Okay.
Can't even think of his name right now. Jonathan Haidt. There it is. Haidt. H-A-I-D-T. Yeah, it's a Jewish name.
Oh, okay.
So,
I was like, I don't recognize that, but yeah, okay.
Anyway, so Hang 10 movement. This is Justin's thing, but all of it's basically based on the Anxious Generation, where the author essentially suggests not allowing your kids to have a smartphone or social media until, I believe it's 16 in the book, and even then it's under a lot of good guidelines, and there's a lot more to it. But essentially, the Hang 10 movement that Justin rolled out is to further support that the only way you're going to get your kid to 16 to avoid smartphone social medias is to actually have a community of people who are devoted and committed to making that a reality.
Yeah, because it needs to be the norm.
Yes, because if your kid's left out in left field, even when they go over to a friend's house and everybody else is talking about what they saw on YouTube the other day or this funny clip or whatever, and it's like your kid's just sitting there twiddling their thumbs, feeling super left out, well, then they're going to come home and go, hey, can I get a phone? Why can't I be on social media? So-and-so is and so-and-so is. And it's just going to be a continuous fight in your family unless you have a community that is doing likewise.
The same thing, yeah.
So Hang 10 movement is 10 different practices broken up into 3 categories of communal practices, household practices, and personal practices. So the communal practices are: 1, we wait until the 10th grade for a smartphone and social media. 2, there are no phones in schools. There's actually a lot of data backing up that schools are finding, even if they have a box at the front of the class where every kid has to drop their phone in that box at the beginning of the class, it really isn't helpful to the distraction level going on in the school, because what happens is as soon as class is over, everybody rushes, grabs their phone, and they're checking all the things and they're doing everything, and it still creates a ton of distraction and tension. The only way to really get rid of that is there are no phones in schools. And so that's a commitment that's a part of this. There's a whole lot of stuff you can follow that with. I think, yet again, it's a part of Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation. Hadn't got a chance to read it yet, but
I've heard a lot of good things.
I've even heard him on several podcasts talk about it. So number 3, under communal, we encourage important conversations to happen face to face, aka we don't text them, and we maybe don't even have them over the phone. If we're going to have an important conversation, we want to do it as embodied people, because ultimately God created us in bodies in a way that we interact face to face. God did not create cell phones in the beginning.
Right.
They haven't been around
necessarily made to use. To communicate that way.
Yeah, even the telegraph. I mean, that's a relatively new invention. So communication face to face. And also, number 4, we adopt communal aspirations, aka we adopt the idea that we are going to do this together. Number 5, this is our household practices. We have no zones in the house, places where we don't have screens. Number 6, we place all of our screens in public places. So all of our no zones are going to be places that other people can't see, can't be, but even some of those no zones might be like if you're a house with 2 living rooms, one of the living rooms may be a no zone, and that is the space where in this space we don't do screens. Number 7, our phones have a home AKA when we're in the house.
I did that for a minute.
Yes, we did, and got out of the habit.
It worked really well.
So you know what got us out of the habit?
What?
When you got the Omnipod
Yes.
for your diabetes sensor?
Yeah.
All that stuff, glucose monitor.
Yeah.
All of that, because your phone was the device that kind of got us out of that practice. Both of us did that.
Yeah.
But yeah, our phones need a place to go that isn't just always in our pocket.
Just with us at all times, yeah.
Number 8, own your settings. So your settings.
Which one is this, personal?
This is under personal practices, yeah. You own your settings so your settings don't own you. Because at this point, our phone carrier creators recognize, like, hey, it's probably not good for you to constantly be on this themselves, and also people were pushing for it. So there are a lot of ways to set up, like, I don't get notifications from all of these apps, or at these times I don't get any notification. I'm a massive fan of setting downtimes on your phone. Wake up, number 9, wake up before your phone, which is similar to scripture before smartphone. Mm-hmm. That's basically what he's implying there. And then go to bed after your phone, meaning you put your phone away and there's still time before you go and get in the bed. Like that may be just a 30-minute window where you put your phone down.
I hit the camera, I'm sorry.
It's okay. But yeah, 30-minute window where you put your phone to bed, you're done with it for the rest of the night.
I think that's such a good idea. I need to do that.
Yeah, and that one of the things that does, we can whole tangent every one of these, but one of the things that does is it just lets your brain and your eyes settle and your body to find enough calm that you can then go to sleep once bedtime gets here without feeling that 15, 20, 30-minute toss and turn because you're still amped up because you just got done watching this really over-dramatized short on whatever your social media of choice is.
And there's research to show that blue light is affecting our hormones. Mm. So we have like infertility issues. We have hormone imbalances or, insufficiencies and all this kind of stuff. And could be all the screens that we're looking at.
Absolutely it is. Or it's a part
of it. It's a part of it, yeah.
Yeah. 10th and final one of the Hang Ten movement is an hour off each day. So at some point in your day, there's an hour where you as an adult, but also the entire household, but this one's probably most right now to you as an adult, that you are not on your phone or any screen. Right.
We're not smartwatch wearers, but I think
that would have to include it.
Right. Yeah. You would have to include that. Just as an aside, we hadn't talked about smartwatches, but I think that's included when it comes to screen time.
Yeah. So if you're wanting to get into more limitations beyond just some of the ones suggested in the book, if you're looking to set some long-term limitations for your kids, I'd recommend checking out the Hang Ten movement. It's literally hang10movement.com. I guess I could have guessed that earlier when I was searching for the right email, but here we are.
Anyways,
Man, so many things, so many thoughts, so many more things we could say. Any final thoughts from you, Virginia?
Not necessarily. I think that I think that we just have to remember that there's no point in being hard on ourselves if we realize we haven't been doing it the greatest way, like we
grow in it.
Yeah, we're growing, and that's the whole point, right? Is to read these books and to learn and to do better. Once you know better, you can do better. And so just
the more you know.
Yeah. So don't, change is possible, and don't shame yourself.
That's good. I appreciate that he also ends the chapter with talking about not living in fear of screens. Like, do they have the potential to do a ton of harm? Absolutely they do. Unequivocally, screens have the potential to do a lot of harm. But if we're just setting wise limitations for ourselves and our families, like, we're probably going to be getting more of the benefits, of which there are unequivocally a ton of those.
Yeah.
We're probably going to be primarily getting the benefits of the screens instead of the negatives.
Right. The negatives aren't then outweighing.
That's right.
The benefits.
Because we put wise limitations in place for both of us.
With, what is it that Spider-Man's uncle tells him?
With great power comes great responsibility. Andrew Garfield got told something different. I don't remember what it was.
Well,
it was it was a whole deal. Yeah.
But yeah, with power comes great responsibility. And boom, there you go. Thank you, Spider-Man.
Thank you, Uncle Ben.
Uncle Ben.
Yes. Thank you, Uncle Ben. Yeah. Give us our grace reminder, Virginia.
Yeah, we always need the reminder of grace. God's love inspires our action, but our action does not inspire God's love. Our family habits will not change God's love for us, but God's love for us should change our family habits. Thank you, Justin Whitmel Early, for keeping that reminder at the end of every one of your chapters.
Yep. So we threw a lot of things, and they bounce from one end to the other. If you want to have conversations about screen times, we are not experts, but we have lots of opinions, and we'd love to share even more of them.
And we're learning.
Yes, we are learning.
For
and that's
ourselves.
kind of the point.
Youngins.
But before we sign off, Virginia, what are we eating?
This is a great question. I did not have one ready to go, but I could talk about, hey, I'll do that one. Peanut butter bites.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love peanut butter bites so much.
So, fun fact, Bowls of Life was started right after Tyler and I got married.
Yep.
And I was in between finishing school and us going to Australia. So I didn't start a dietitian job. I still had to take my exam and all that. So I started a blog.
Yeah, you did.
It was Bowls of Life. And so one of my first recipes that I shared was peanut butter bites. And that actually...
I love them every since.
Yeah, ever since.
Every since. I lose my mind about these peanut butter bites. Oh, so good.
But it came up on my memories today when I shared that blog post. So
tell me how to make them.
Yeah, so there's like certain measurements that you need, but you could just Google it and figure it out. But basically you're going to get some oats, about a cup of oats, and then about a half cup of chocolate chips, and then you're going to get about, I think it's a half cup of peanut butter, and about a fourth of a cup, I think, of honey. And you can add other things to it, like if you want nuts. I've done flaxseed, nuts, like pecans do really well with that, or some sort of like dried fruit. But you mix it all together, and you roll it into little balls, and then you put it in the refrigerator.
You roll it up.
You roll it and put it in the pan.
Okay, just making sure.
Yes, I do normally put it on a pan and put it in the freezer or the refrigerator so that they harden up. And you can store them in the fridge so that they do keep that structure.
Way. Yeah.
But yeah, they're super yummy. It's like a homemade granola ball instead of a granola bar.
They're so good.
And they really are yummy. And they call them protein bites, or peanut butter bites or whatever, but it's a little pack of protein and carb that's good energy sustaining. So yeah, there you go. Boom.
Awesome. Thanks for hanging out with us on the Bowls of Life podcast. Here's what we would love for you to do for us today. Wherever you listen, give it a like, give it a rating, give it a review, whatever they allow. Make sure you subscribe. All the places should definitely have subscribe. That way you don't miss out when new episodes happen. They'll automatically pop up and remind you. And then the last part of this part, share this podcast with somebody. Are we the best experts in the whole world on screens? No. But I think we shared a lot of awesome and helpful things that other people should definitely know more about.
Yeah, absolutely. Head to our website, bowlsoflife.com. Check out the resources designed to help you make an adventure of faith, family, and food. We've added some new ones. Well, yeah, I guess this episode comes out later than when those have come out. But if you haven't checked it out, there are some new ones on there. While you're there, you can also consider becoming a supporter of Bowls of Life. There's 2 different ways you can do that. You can do it monthly, or you can give us a one-time gift, and that's just, again, so that we can continue doing this. We see it as not just a hobby, but a job, because it's something that we love doing, but we want to continue providing this resource.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'd say thank you for joining us on this journey of messy adventures in faith, family, and food.